There's a feeling in the air that you can't get anywhere except in Calgary. I tasted 1,000 yesterday that I love.
2 and 7 News First updates.
It's here at last. The Eau Claire Market has finally arrived, and it's sure to be Calgary's favorite people meeting place. So come marketing this grand opening weekend, August 13 to 15. Explore the fresh food market and the many one-of-a-kind shops and services that are already open, and get familiar with those that will be opening soon. Soon.
Well, this sucks.
So, how did we get here? How does a one-of-a-kind cultural and entertainment hub built on the doorstep of downtown Calgary and Prince's Island Park end up as a giant pile of dirt? This isn't just Calgary's story. It's a glimpse into something much bigger. The loss of Eau Claire Market isn't just a story about a place that failed. It's a story about how we've stopped trying. What haunts me isn't the past. It's what the future now demands. Efficiency over expression. Familiarity over wonder. Safety over soul. Character is sacrificed, both for content and contentment, and we call it progress. To understand why that matters, why the death of a little market in Calgary stings more than it should, we have to go back to when we still believed in ideas that made things feel alive. The prospect of the Eau Claire Market had its origins as far back as September of 1984, with Calgary Mayor Ralph Klein traveling to the source of the market's inspiration, Vancouver's Granville Island, a renovated cluster of restaurants and retail orbiting a fresh food market. And, lucky for Calgary, the city had a rundown bus barn on the footsteps of the Bow River, just begging to be gentrified. The community of Eau Claire had been hit particularly hard by urbanization in the 1980s, consisting mostly of parking lots and prostitution, which I suppose made the parking lots come in handy if you needed something, or someone, to do in downtown Calgary back then. It was obvious that the area needed to be revitalized, and a public market seemed like the golden ticket to do this. Construction was originally planned to begin as soon as spring of 1986. Naturally, anyone that's watched anything about any defunct entity ever knows that wouldn't happen. Sure enough, the project experienced several delays amid the recession and multiple developers backing out, with the budget eventually ballooning from $21 to $43 million. The Toronto-based Crescent Corporation, along with their president George Wilson, continue to stay optimistic about their vision of a Calgarian Granville Island in late 1989.
We are going full steam ahead with our project and hope to be in the ground in the spring.
Aldermen at City Council, however, were already doubting the long-term success of the project, most notably Alderman Dale Hodges.
I never saw it as being economically viable. I'd like to see Council look at the land as an area for housing or mixed-use development.
Hodges also pointed out the glaring differences in how Vancouver approached Granville Island, citing the millions of dollars of federal funding with the population to match each dollar.
I'm not sure it's achievable without grants. We just don't have millions of people needed to support this kind of a thing.
It wouldn't be wise to question Hodges either, as he was also instrumental in bringing down a Hells Angels clubhouse that conspired to blow up his home. You don't get a park named after you by losing arguments with biker gangs. Take that, Robert Moses. Not one to back down to someone named Dale, Wilson would continue to boast to the press.
In response to the critics who were wondering if we were really going to see something this time, I say yes. I've always believed that the day will come when I can say, I told you so.
Even the most hopeful of aldermen, such as Ray Clark, who had once led the Eau Claire Market task force before the previous developers backed out, waited with bated breath through the stalemate.
It's a go again, but I'm not going to get excited and jump up and down just because there's another shovel going into the ground. I'm gonna wait till the doors are open and then jump for joy. It'll happen one day, when the time is right, and when it does happen, it'll be the highlight of downtown.
It wouldn't be until April Fool's Day of 1992 that shovels finally hit dirt. And yes, the critics had a field day calling that a bad omen. But let's not forget, Apple Incorporated was also founded on April Fool's Day of 1976. One went on to become a trillion-dollar tech giant that manufactures phones in China. The other became a giant pile of dirt near Chinatown. Nothing happens for a reason, moving on. Wilson certainly wasn't bothered by the calendar either, boasting that they couldn't have planned the timing any better, despite the timing not being planned in the slightest. It was only natural that the Ramada hotel chain started to get cold feet over the prospect of having a property next to a market that, despite being 3.2 hectares in size, was still dwarfed by Wilson's ego. Wilson did, however, listen to Hodges' concern over the lack of population surrounding the market by looking into constructing several condos across Prince's Island. Despite the skeptics at City Hall, many Calgarians were nonetheless excited for the addition of the market. Notably excited were the producers of Shakespeare in the Park, who had just moved their productions to the island from Olympic Plaza. I guess I'll need to do a video about its demolition next.
Technically, it's a renovation, not a demolition, but still.
And so, after a few more minor delays for good measure, the Eau Claire Market officially opened its doors on Friday the 13th of August 1993. Rewind to my superstition rant a minute ago, moving on. And what a market it was. 10 full-line restaurants, 60 retail stores, and a 5-screen, 1,500-seat Cineplex theater, in addition to the highly touted 300-seat IMAX theater, a first of its kind in Calgary. And within a year of its opening, its success was equally as touted. 95% of the space contained locally owned stores, ranging from restaurants, clothing stores, an art gallery, gift shops, and of course the fresh produce. 129 buskers had permits to perform around the market, which had exceeded expectations by bringing in over 300,000 people in its first year, roughly half of the city's population in 1993. The most recent addition to the market by this point was an automotive-themed bar called The Garage, a place Lexa and I visited quite extensively. The $5 lager tasted better going down than coming up. There weren't any prevalent red flags for future tenants by this point either, with the Hard Rock Cafe prepared to make its Calgary debut at the height of the location-based themed entertainment boom in 1995, along with the family restaurant Kelsey's, which remains a staple of the core experience of traveling to the Calgary International Airport. Ah, crap, it closed. I'm never flying again. All in all, the skies for the market were almost as blue as the 90s decor that enveloped its bright interior. But anyone who lives in Calgary for a while knows that, at any moment, those skies can get overcast real quick. The city's attitude of build it and they will come was starting to backfire as the housing projects for the area surrounding the market were continuing to stall. Combine this with Eau Claire still being fairly isolated compared to the TD Core and Stephen Ave along the train line, and the market was struggling to grow its attendance. Compared to Granville Island, which was designed to foster local business along with its art scene over inherent profit, the various developers of the Eau Claire Market had their tunnel vision set squarely on the latter. Warning signs came as early as 1996, with the local tenants being caught off guard by a chain corporation like Subway moving in. By 1998, Crescent and the Alberta Treasury branches had to be bought out of their debt. It was John Gibson and the Patriot Equities Group that would be the lucky buyer and assume 100% ownership of the market the following year, the year I was born. Gibson was optimistic about his plans for the market.
We didn't buy this property because we thought the fundamentals were distressed. We thought there were strong fundamentals to build on.
Patriot decided to keep their plans under wraps until they gathered research from customers and tenants, further stating that they didn't have any facts or good quality information and opted to stay open-minded. On the one hand, it showcased their flexibility and desire to learn. But, on the other hand, and in the minds of the 110 tenants, they didn't have a plan. Experts suggested more national chains would be brought in, but that the market would still retain its uniqueness compared to other shopping centers. Less than a decade into its existence, Eau Claire Market was already struggling to attract new tenants. Compounding that was its inability to hold on to the ones it already had. The Hard Rock Cafe and Kelsey's both abandoned ship barely 5 years into their tenures. They were replaced by a Brewster's and a Sumo, with CEO John Gibson personally courting the latter and insisting the market needed a Japanese restaurant, because nothing says urban renewal like vague sushi. By May 2002, it became clear that Patriot Equities were financially in over their head. That month, a Calgary-based, finally, investment group named Proprietary Industries stepped in, entering a 50-50 joint ownership agreement with Patriot. 1 month later, Proprietary acquired the remaining stake entirely. This made John Gibson the most John Gibson to ever John Gibson the city of Calgary, until John Gibson of the Anaheim Ducks did it again 15 years later, this time with a Flames collapse instead of a real estate collapse. The new ownership quickly announced a $3 million revitalization plan to increase the capacity of the upper level of the market, which was essentially just an observation area where you could throw things at the janitors down below.
The problem was that Proprietary themselves were also financially in over their head.
As the following day after the ownership was announced, their shares in Toronto trading dropped 18% due to the company overstating its financial statements. The true scope of how bad the situation with Proprietary would come out in the following months. By August of 2002, Proprietary would end up firing both its CEO and CFO, alleging they manipulated share prices, received secret commissions, and lied to the Alberta Securities Commission while under oath. The stock market in general had been taking sustained hits since 9/11, but with the allegations against the two executives being, quote, as bad as it gets, according to the ASC, Proprietary was bound to go down as fast as the towers themselves. CEO Peter Workham and CFO Theodore Hennig had been doing this for the past 3 years. And while these allegations weren't criminal, it didn't stop Proprietary from changing their locks and freezing them out of their computers as they struggled to figure out a new course. By the time the Eau Claire Market limped into its 10-year anniversary in 2003, Proprietary had sued the former executives, and tenants had started to leave, with one business estimating seeing an 80% drop in foot traffic within a 5-year span. The novelty had worn off for Calgarians. A little over a year into their great experiment, Proprietary had lost over $84 million on the market. They became eager to get rid of it. And once a buyer had stepped in with a little over $31 million, Proprietary threw up their hands and said, good enough. More importantly, the businesses in Calgary were more enthusiastic.
Proprietary officials were not retail managers. They didn't have any retail management experience. They bought it at a time where certainly retailing in Canada is going through a huge transformation, and certainly retail in Calgary is going through a huge transformation.
Michael Going, president of Good Earth Cafes and makers of the best London fogs ever, was also certain about the public's desire for stable ownership.
I just wish someone would either keep it or buy it, or whatever, who has the commitment and the ability to move the project forward.
Proprietary had been dragged through 500 yards of liquid crap in their short time owning the market. And worse, it didn't look like they were even going to be able to get rid of the thing. Regina's Harvard Developments initially walked away after failing to come to terms as to the refinancing of the property. Harvard was noteworthy for already owning Calgary's Sunridge and North Hill malls, so this additional breakdown in operations was particularly worrying. It was so bad for Proprietary that by February of 2004, they were apparently hanging a for sale sign on their own door after a group attempted to purchase a significant part of the company. However, a lasting remnant of the 2002 financial scandal was Proprietary's cease trade order imposed by the ASC. Any sale of the company would have to go through them first. By May 15th, Proprietary was working on a $28 million deal with an undisclosed buyer to get the struggling market off of their struggling hands. 4 days later, Proprietary was able to begin trading again on the stock market, confident the worst was behind them. On May 25th, the undisclosed buyer of the market was revealed to be Harvard Developments all along. Their commitment to own Eau Claire had been undeniable through the scandals with Proprietary. But would that and their experience be enough to finally realize Calgary's expectations of their own Granville Island? Time would tell, with their grand plan beginning in 2005. Whatever Harvard had in the works for the Eau Claire Market, it would have to be without their trademark IMAX theater. It closed on July 18, 2004, after 11 years. Theater officials were quick to dispel rumors of low attendance being the main culprit, instead citing the sale of the market earlier that spring. Turns out, Harvard wasn't interested in purchasing it from Proprietary, who at this point had gone radio silent involving the matter. Tenants leaving was one thing, but the closure of the IMAX theater created much more formidable shockwaves, especially for the niche businesses that depended on the traffic of people waiting for showtimes and exploring the market. Less than 2 months into its ownership, Harvard was already on the back foot in the eyes of Calgarians. Still, It could be worse. You could be Proprietary Industries. Just when it looked like they could go into hiding in May of 2005, those pesky former executives applied to have their hearing dismissed due to the Alberta Securities Commission failing to be impartial to their case. To their credit, the ASC had been under fire for this exact thing with a separate company earlier in the month. They were even attempting to prevent the provincial government from interfering with their investigation. So, just to recap, Proprietary's downfall was now being disputed, Harvard was getting cold feet, and the Eau Claire Market was caught in the middle of the bickering and cowardice, losing any support that it desperately needed. Eventually, both the former CEO and CFO of Proprietary would stand trial, each facing 24 counts of fraud. Proprietary itself would completely restructure itself under a new name and shift its focus to Pakistani oil. The only thing that would have made this change even more Albertan is if they started picking fights against Ottawa.
I'm pissed!
Without any proprietary baggage except their own, Harvard laid out their 5-year plan for the Eau Claire Market. It consisted of the usual suspects like hotels, condo space, and a +15 connection to the neighboring Sheraton Hotel, while also considering more absurd things like a 3rd floor. It's worth noting that the market still didn't know what to do with its 2nd floor. While Calgary continued to improve its downtown to be up to par with cities like Vancouver, it was its most Vancouver-inspired attraction that continued to catch the most flack from the city's aldermen, notably Drew Farrell.
Eau Claire Market fails in so many ways, on so many levels. We never had the residential base to support that shopping to begin with. And we still really don't. Successful markets are homegrown, low-key and built from existing, inexpensive structures already in place. And once you've had a series of failures, it's just what you become known for, and it's very hard to recover.
Even the establishments that had survived up until this point had grown jaded with the excessive business taxes and rent, things that Granville Island was famous for keeping low in order to incubate and grow its small businesses. Locals had nothing to sink their teeth into, and tourism had been hit hard since 9/11 and the SARS outbreak in 2002. Although Eau Claire was finally getting housing, there was no incentive to live in a place without any restaurants, cafes, or even a basic grocery store. No residents in an area means less business, which just leads to even fewer residents. It's a vicious cycle that the Eau Claire Market desperately needed to break. And by the spring of 2006, the city and Harvard started to ask Calgarians for input on the market to, hopefully, have a development plan in place by the end of the year. A significant population of the public whose voice had often fallen on deaf ears was, surprisingly, the people of Eau Claire themselves. Writer William McLennan had grown up in the area in the midst of the Great Depression and spoke fondly of the vibrant businesses that had one by one met their end by the time he retired as a schoolteacher.
It was Eau Claire until I was 18 or 20. That's how most of the people pronounced it. I can still hear the noon whistles. From one side, you hear the dairy whistle. From the other, the sawmill.
He yearned for heritage components to be incorporated into the plans for Eau Claire's future. Without any of its history still standing, one had to consider the struggling market to be the epitome of the area's failure. Along with Harvard's plans of revitalizing the market, the city was planning on a revitalization of the plaza itself. This included improving the flow of foot traffic to Prince's Island, moving pubs closer to the river, and including more green spaces. The problem was that both Harvard and the city of Calgary were waiting to see what the other did, and communication wasn't the specialty of either. The former were still hiding some plans for the market, and the latter were radio silent on how much the project would cost. While Harvard spoke of vague plans for revitalizations and ducked away from interviews, city officials were already spouting the D word: demolition. Drew Farrell argued that the market would never work as a farmer's market and that it needed to possibly be torn down to make way for the basic necessities of the growing community, now at 1,600 citizens. And though Eau Claire had grown, it had done so vertically, with corporate skyscrapers flanking nothing but empty parking lots and deserted retail. 2007 kicked off with both Brewster's and Cajun Charlie's, well, kicking off. Each restaurant threw in the towel at the height of Calgary's economic boom, with Brewster's operations manager citing ongoing redevelopment plans as the final straw. Their kitchen gear was unceremoniously tossed into an auction catalog. Harvard, ever the hopeful romantic, reassured its tenants that the market's long game would pay off, praising its strong relationship with the city. If the city wasn't romantically interested in Harvard in the spring of 2007, selling them the land surrounding the market that summer for $12.4 million was the equivalent of the goth chick tossing the nerd her spicy Instagram. A tease, not a promise. And as Alderman Rick McIver pointed out, the city could have sold for more if it hadn't leased the market's land out until 2074. But Harvard had stopped playing the pre-2008 financial crisis fantasy league. Both Harvard and City Council were finally aligned on their desires: demolish Eau Claire and start fresh. For Calgarians, it meant a blank slate. For small businesses, it meant the boot. Suggested plans indicated that all that would remain would be the historic smokestack and the Eau Claire Lumber Company building, home to the 1886 cafe, who had been consistently left out of redevelopment talks. Of course, the two parties were sure not to say the D word when international delegates learned of Eau Claire, such as when the following year marked the invasion of the International Downtown Association upon the city for its Metro Makeover Conference. The term redevelopment had become equivalent to demolition, but with better PR. If the city and Harvard were waving around thesauruses, the community of Eau Claire was metaphorically burning them. In February 2009, the public flatly rejected the initial redesign proposals. Among the plans was an extension of Riverfront Avenue, relocating the 1886 Buffalo Cafe to sit in front of the YMCA, and moving the barley mill beside a condominium, a suggestion that didn't sit well with either 1886's owner, Blaise McNeil, or the mill's general manager, Christine Gilmore.
I like progress, but I don't like progress to the point where they're dumping us by the river. My business would be dead.
Everyone was against it. I don't think we're that loud of a bar, but if I was living in a multi-million-dollar condo complex, I wouldn't want a pub in my backyard.
It's worth noting that alcoholics and general fun lovers who lived in these condos couldn't be reached for comment. Alderman Drew Farrell could, though, and assured the public that progress was being made and that there was no rush, despite the year-long delay and economic decline. That year-long delay would extend well into 2013. Harvard again stated its redevelopment plans and insisted the market would remain intact during early phases without any indication of the remaining businesses receiving support or the property receiving funding. Harvard was essentially delaying the inevitable to avoid more backlash, giving just enough vague reassurances while providing no real lifeline. The end of 2014 saw the city's lust for Vancouver evolve from its markets to its condos, with an announcement made about the construction of a 218-unit complex in Eau Claire. Plans for the future of the market remained as a vague footnote in the article. Unfazed by yet another delay from community pushback in 2015, Harvard seemed more keen on its upcoming name change to Godot Developments Incorporated, because clearly they were in no hurry to arrive. This time, the concerns stemmed from Harvard attempting to remove bylaw restrictions on installing plus 15s and the relocation of the iconic smokestack. By this point, the Eau Claire Community Association was fed up. They claimed that, despite receiving many relaxations to regulations back in 2008, Harvard had yet to do anything with them. Now, 7 years later, the community wasn't exactly eager to give them more. And they weren't alone. Top city officials echoed this sentiment, and thus, a deadline was reached. If Harvard had yet to complete Phase 1, whatever that was at this point, by 2018, the city could buy back the property. This 3-year deadline did not look at all feasible for Harvard. However, the 2018 price tag of $110 million also didn't look feasible for the city, considering they sold it to Harvard at a tenth of the price initially due to the massive 75-year lease and wanting to make a quick buck before the 2008 financial crisis. Their optimism in Harvard had been as blind as a Calgary Flames referee in 2004. The good news from all the delays is that it opened the door for Eau Claire to get the transit infrastructure it needed via the Green Line LRT project, set to begin construction in 2023. For now, the city tentatively gave Harvard a pass to, hopefully, develop its 5 towers and 1,000 residential units. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi was clearly caught between a rock and a hard place.
Eau Claire has been underperforming for a long time, and there have been a whole series of proposals to fix it and make it better. Really, what we are stuck with is, are these compromises worth it in order to get the redevelopment that everyone wants at that site?
Despite some pushback from the Calgary Heritage Authority, who compared moving the smokestack to moving Yogi the Bear to a petting zoo, whatever that means, a large majority of Calgarians were impressed by the proposal. The problem? Harvard had been proposing for over a decade. At a certain point, you either bury your big black shovel into Eau Claire or call off the engagement. Writers for the Calgary Herald were also getting tired, even pointing out the amount of times the phrase, "there's a new plan to revitalize Eau Claire," had been used since 1990. Against the wishes of Drew Farrell, the smokestack temporarily had its heritage designation suspended in order to be moved a whopping 10 meters as part of Harvard's plans, which had finally received a green light from City Council in late 2017. This sign of progress would be short-lived, as the project would be delayed yet again in spring 2019. Rather than Harvard not returning the city's calls, it was the city who wasn't communicating what the plans for the Green Line were. Harvard was also backing off on having an office tower in the complex, putting it on the chopping block along with the theaters, restaurants, retail outlets, food store, and overall confidence from the city that it had back in 2007. All that was left was a 1,000-unit residential project without anything for those residents to do. A casual observer, especially one who'd been to Vancouver, could easily see, through all the stalling and half-baked office tower proposals, that both the city and Harvard had completely lost the plot. By 2019, Granville Island had become so much more than a farmer's market. It featured 100 shops, boutiques, and galleries, 75 food outlets, 100 restaurants, and 12 entertainment venues. Just for kids, 25 dedicated stores and a bunch of water-based attractions. Eau Claire, by contrast, had a small playground and the aforementioned thrill of throwing things at janitors from the second-floor balcony. Calgary wanted to attract tourists to a space with no amenities and no clear way to get there. Meanwhile, Vancouver nurtured both its tourist population and its local art scene. Granville Island wasn't just functional, it was inspiring. It housed the original Emily Carr School of Art and continues to host the Fringe Festival. Eau Claire's attempt at becoming a vibrant community was also being quietly kneecapped by Calgary's former, or maybe still reigning, worst neighborhood, East Village. Despite ongoing issues near the drop-in center, East Village saw massive improvements. The Central Library, a revamped St. Patrick's Island, and a retail complex where a superstore somehow sits on top of a Shoppers Drug Mart, which I'm sure is totally intuitive to navigate. Why all the progress there? Community revitalization levies. These financial tools were available to East Village because it was municipally owned, and it hit rock bottom. Eau Claire didn't qualify because Harvard owned the land, and giving handouts to a developer that had been stalling for over a decade would have been a PR disaster. But here's the kicker. Eau Claire also wasn't bad enough to justify emergency investment. It was stuck in purgatory. Too run down to attract business, not run down enough to earn help. In short, it was mediocre. A feeling Flames fans know all too well. And so, while the rest of the city evolved, Eau Claire just waited. Dragged its feet. Stuck with a developer that didn't seem interested in leading, and a city that wasn't ready to intervene. By the end of 2019, both sides involved in this trench warfare had nothing new to reveal. Drew Farrell was done mincing words. She openly admitted what many were thinking, that the 2007 sale to Harvard had been a mistake.
I have absolutely no faith in this group fulfilling their obligations. We're just extending a very, very difficult situation, and the city in no way has benefited from this arrangement. The whole purpose of selling the Eau Claire site was to see the site developed. The community has been waiting for over a generation for a grocery store, and it looks like we'll be waiting for a while.
In the eyes of the city, the only thing that Harvard development seemed capable of developing was resentment. Some began calling for the Eau Claire Market to return to its roots, ditch the retail, bring back the food, make it a destination again, not another mall like the Core or Chinook, not another brand clone, but something local, something worth caring about, to separate itself from any potential collapses in the retail landscape. Others still defended Harvard, insisting the timing just hadn't been right, that all they needed was one good moment to begin. But no one realized those moments were already behind us, and no one could foresee the retail and global collapse that would begin in the spring.
On this Sunday night, the federal plan to flatten the curve in the COVID-19 pandemic. The Prime Minister says nothing is off the table to slow the spread.
We are looking daily at next steps that we might take or we should take.
Canadians are bracing for a dramatic change in everyday life as the week starts with schools, daycares, and some businesses closed in many parts of the country.
I went to what could without a doubt usually be the busiest place in the city. Today, it's a different story. It looked like opening time on a Monday rather than one of its busiest times of the week.
We are going to have a crisis in the commercial real estate market. There's no way to get around it or candy coat it.
COVID-19 has changed how we shop. Congregating in malls to shop or just to hang out seems a long way off right now. Even before the pandemic was declared, many were struggling to survive. Not all of them will.
Once Calgary's malls had reopened in 2020, numerous restrictions were put in place to limit the spread of COVID. Multinational corporations struggled to pay their rent, let alone the small businesses in those malls. By the time Lex and I had moved into Eau Claire in 2022, however, it became clear that the market never needed to implement any social distancing policies. Any glimmer of hope that had, somehow, remained a light before the pandemic had been extinguished. It all became official when, on January 19th of 2023, it was announced that Eau Claire would finally receive the train line it had needed from the very start. The catch is that it was to be built upon the corpse of the market, which was to be closed and demolished alongside its riverfront condos the following year. The only thing the tenants and residents could do was plan and wait. Wait for the end of their livelihoods, their homes, and their identities.
Before I was involved in any official capacity, I was just a little mascot running around in the store in diapers.
It's really been wonderful. Even in my short time here, we had been thinking that we had at least a couple more years here in this location, but that's not to be.
Not only did we need to get to an agreement with Harvard Developments, we needed to make sure we have a logical and an appropriate, reasonable approach in dealing with all the tenants who would be affected by this.
You always think you're going to just have that little bit more time. A lot of people think Eau Claire is closing today, and it's not. We're all still here.
Time for a change, but it's with anything sadness too. End of an era is the best way I can describe the closure of Eau Claire.
It's strange to walk through a place that has its final days written in stone. Before that moment, it's a punchline, a place to stroll through, ironically, a place where you find joy in society's failures. But once the announcement comes, everything shifts. You feel those walls a little differently, as if each grain of sand in them is falling through the hourglass of time. You see the teal and red and know, soon, it'll be replaced by brown, or at best, sterile white. And you realize you're not just the last generation to walk these halls. You're the last one who will ever care. The Eau Claire Market closed its doors for the last time on May 31st, 2024. In one final stroke of emblematic irony, the province would pull $1.5 billion in funding for the Green Line project, effectively scrapping plans for the Eau Claire Market C train station. By the time the final wall of the old market came down in spring 2025, it had effectively been demolished for nothing. Why? Why has Eau Claire continued to bug me? Why has the name consumed my mind? It goes beyond the public autopsy everyone else has performed. Yes, we understand how we got here, but what we also need to understand is, now that it's gone, where are we going? Eau Claire Market wasn't just a failed experiment. It was a symbol of how allergic we've become to anything that challenges us, to discomfort, to feeling too much. And it isn't just the borderline personalities that are content with this kind of stagnation. It's the borderline society as a whole, and it extends far beyond a city or a market. Something once so inspired as West Edmonton Mall's Phase 3 food court or Bourbon Street have been turned into a dystopian embodiment of the moxies that resides inside it. Because why be somewhere when you can be anywhere? Or, more accurately, nowhere. Much like how the vowels in babunst are nowhere. Take a flight to Disney World, and it's a similar story. Once the masters of theming, you are now lucky to get a room with a framed picture of Elsa doing that same smug face that she does on everything. It extends beyond architecture, too. Hollywood's paranoia of our CinemaSins generation being able to handle anything remotely unfamiliar or uncomfortable, pushing to the top the remakes while sabotaging their own hidden gems as proof. Hand-painted movie posters have given way to Photoshop cutout checklists that I find hard-pressed to believe anyone would display on their wall or chest. Let alone when those same posters and thumbnails change every hour based on whatever algorithm has been stalking you in the digital bushes. Music, when it isn't soullessly sampled in an attempt to sell out stadiums, has been condensed to appear more seamless when consumed vertically, not heard, but filtered. The same airy vocals sound the best when slowed down and played in the background of whatever it was that I watched 5 seconds ago. It is at its best when worshipped, not listened to. Advertisements, once designed to immerse their products in an inviting world to the viewer, are now nothing more than frames with shutter speeds almost as fast as the voice used to sell those frames in the same hypnotic, tired cadence. Because being relatable now means being always happy. Always
fine. Always content. Anything more might demand language. And language might lead to thought.
There are no suicides, people just unalive themselves. Women are just uterus havers. Companies are more willing to say reorganization rather than layoffs. Art is content. Truth is trending. Friendships means a number on your follower count. Community means engagement rates. People will not miss the Eau Claire Market because they will not miss anything else. They will not feel the loss because they can't name what they're missing. And the market might have succeeded if we still lived in a world which valued it. Why risk creating something that demands thought and effort when you can simply erode the feeling of pain from the concept of failure in the eyes of society? Within the shortcomings of capitalism and materialism are where we find the urge, the need to put humanity into it. To take that risk, to make sure something truly resonates. Creations that have the potential to resonate also have the potential to spin out of control. Their legacies would be undetermined. The unfortunate reality of life is that we cannot control the legacies that we construct, neither for ourselves nor for the things that we build. Nirvana is remembered by most as the band that ignited a genre destined to become as tired as Kurt himself. Walt Disney is remembered by most as an entertainer of humanity's yesterdays, rather than a developer of its tomorrow. And the Eau Claire Market is remembered by most as a failure. Most. Not all. Not me. I remember Nirvana as a band who screamed authenticity into a world filled with leather, big hair, and boob jobs. I remember Walt Disney, an optimist, whose ideas of an experimental prototype community of tomorrow continue to be utilized throughout the world to this day. And I remember the Eau Claire Market not as a failure, but as this. On the 11th hour, at the end of May 2024, the elusive crowds finally arrived. The food trucks, the street performers, the Rondell Roberts Band, and, most importantly, the people of Calgary. For one day in the market's turbulent life, the thought wasn't about relevance. It was about resonance. This isn't just Calgary's story. It's a glimpse into something much bigger. Though we forget all the parties involved in the saga of the Eau Claire Market are human, it's important to find ways to relate to them. Whether it's the Crescent Corporation's ambition, Patriot Equity's optimism, Proprietary Industries' misfortune, the City of Calgary's blind trust, or Harvard Development's perfected art of procrastination. Each one of them made their promises. As did I. The only difference is, I intend to keep mine. I'll never forget this place. And I'll do everything I can to make sure no one else forgets either. Your memory will carry on.